Welcome. I'm Si Alhir, and we have an absolutely tremendous topic and guest today. I'm a coach, consultant, practitioner, and author with over 4 decades of experience focused on transformation. I've partnered with hundreds of organizations and thousands of individuals and teams to help them calibrate their business models and operating models to achieve business outcomes. As I like to say, I'm a student of life, a pracademic in praxis, a student of human nature and human dynamics in the context of the human condition. The human animal can be the most magnificent and most dangerous animal in its natural habitat. The topic today in conversation is both personal and professional to me. In particular, consider the time and place we find ourselves today. The world is, and really we as a species are experiencing, as I like to say, a crisis of mindfulness on a global scale across various dimensions, where ultimately everyone needlessly struggles and suffers. Much of this stems from us not recognizing, appreciating, and working with the illusion of control, which is really at the root of much of the struggle and suffering. In particular, I learned of Ellen in the very early 1980s, if you will, really through her seminal paper, The Illusion of Control, in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, which was published in 1975. The paper itself is about our tendency to overestimate our ability to control. In particular, the paper defines the illusion of control as the expectancy, if you will, of a personal success probability inappropriately higher than the objective probability would warrant. And the paper focuses on how factors from skill situations introduced into chance situations cause individuals to feel inappropriately confident. So ask yourself, when was the last time you yourself or you observed others experiencing being inappropriately confident, where the expectancy of success was inappropriately higher than objectively warranted? This goes to the root of so much that we encounter in our personal lives and professional lives. The illusion of control is so pervasive, inconspicuous, nuanced, if you will, in our everyday world. After reading the paper, I began to vividly recognize it in almost everything that I encountered. As I'll mention a few things here, in particular, in Dr. Seuss's The Cat in the Hat, as I shared it with our daughter. In Maurice Sendak, Where the Wild Things Are, likewise, I recognized it. In Nietzsche's, if you will, The Three Metamorphoses, the camel, the lion, and the child, I likewise recognized it. And throughout our human experience, both personally and professionally, appreciating and working with the illusion of control has been crucial in my personal and professional life. Personally, in working with the uncertainty in my world, and likewise professionally, in working with organizations, teams, and individuals. In all honesty, in business settings, we often avoid the word mindfulness as many respond with, are we going to meditate? And we use the word awareness and working with others to become more aware and mindful. We often avoid being so direct as to say the illusion of control and use the notion of vicious reality control cycle versus virtuous reality navigation cycle. We as leaders, catalysts, change agents cultivate the conditions and provoke ourselves and others in building our own and helping others build their noticing muscle and all its fibers, where we help people shift from a more mindless to a more mindful state. As we've gone through multiple journeys, my colleagues and myself, people often express the shift as liberating, empowering, and readily leads to achieving business goals, objectives, and outcomes. Fundamentally, mindfulness is all about actively noticing, and the mind body unity, as we'll be talking about with Ellen, is all about change that is simultaneously at the level of mind as well as body. Saying all that, to be very, very frank, I cannot do Ellen justice in this brief introduction. She's the first woman to be tenured in psychology at Harvard. She's known worldwide as the mother of mindfulness and the mother of positive psychology. She's the author of 11 other books. Her trailblazing work is focused on mindfulness and mindlessness, the illusion of control, decision making, and aging, with far reaching and profound impacts on the professional and personal aspects of everyone in our society, if you will. Her contributions cannot be understated whatsoever. And again, I cannot do her justice. With all that being said, let's welcome Ellen into the conversation. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much.
It's such an honor to have you all around. Thank you for making the time.
My pleasure. But I must tell you that, and your introduction is beautiful, but the illusion of control, which is where I started my career back in the early 70s, has been updated, turned around inside out, with a much richer discussion in my new book, The Mindful Body.
Yes.
And, I think that there were so many mistakes I made way back when that mirrored what was happening in the world at large, where people thought they knew, other people didn't know. If you did something that was different from other people, you were seen as, and as you just said now, having an illusion of control. Let's be clear that people do not have illusions. From the perspective of the individual, they believe they have control. Well, I'm here to announce that we have this control that decades ago, I, like everybody else, saw as illusory. That when you recognize that everything that is was put there by people. They were decisions made at a much earlier time. For something to be a decision means there was at one point uncertainty. All right. So you're not sure what to do, you decide. And then over time, decades from population to population, these are passed down as absolute truths. And when we, as I say, put people back in the equation, and a very simple rule for people might be just to say, who says so?
Mhm.
As you did when you were a little kid, to recognize that everything is mutable, everything. Now, the world is set up as if everything that is there for a very important reason. And it's not. Everything that is has served some people and no longer serves other people. I don't know if this is going to be too far afield, but oftentimes when I'm lecturing, I'll look in the audience and see if there's a tall person there. And there's almost always a man about 6'5", and I'll ask him to come to the stage. And here I am at 5'3", and he at 6'5", and we look kind of silly. And I'll ask him to put his hand up, and I put my hand next to his. His hand is 3 inches larger than mine. And then I just raise the question, should we do anything the same way? Now, no matter what you're doing, there's some body, some rule, whether it's in industry, sports, even around the house, where people say, this is the way you do it. And that's when we should say, who says so? So the more different you are from the person who wrote the rule, the more important it is for you to question the rule. Imagine this 6'5" man holding a tennis racket and I holding a tennis racket. We should not be holding it the same way. All right. So now when we talk about control and whether it's illusory, we can never know. Now you can start off believing you have no control, or you can believe you have control. And it probably couldn't happen, but let's say it could turn out that you either have it or you don't have it. To me, the saddest case is when you have control and you don't realize it.
Mm-hmm.
And if everything is mutable, that means the amount of control you actually have is extraordinary. So a lot of this book, The Mindful Body, deals with my research on health, not all of it. But the point of it is that mind and body, these are just words. And if we put the mind and the body back together, then wherever you put the mind, you're necessarily putting the body. And so our control, not over just our day-to-day activities, but our control over our health, far exceeds what people currently believe. Most of the things that people believe with respect, not just to health, but many things come from science. And people don't realize that science only gives us probabilities.
Mm-hmm.
You do a study and you find that this group outperforms this other group, for example. What the findings tell you is that if you were to replicate the exact same study, you'd be likely to get the same findings. All right? So those maybes are translated as absolutes. Now, when you know something absolutely, you don't pay any attention. If you knew what I was going to say next, why bother listening to me? All right. But these absolutes are simply wrong. That there's no information, I think, that remains true across all contexts and time. Um, this became clear to me many, many years ago. I was at a horse event, and this man asked me if I could watch his horse because he wanted to get his horse a hot dog. Well, I was always a straight A student. I knew horses don't eat meat. That was the fact. That was the absolute. And so I wasn't, in my mind, I tried to be polite to him, but in my mind, I'm mocking him. Yeah, horses don't eat meat. He came back with the hot dog and the horse ate it. And that's when I realized that everything I think I know could be wrong. Now, many people get upset about that. For me, it was very exciting because that meant that all the things people say can't be, I say, well, why not? How do we know? Because science can only tell you that what you tried didn't work. It can't tell you that nothing can work. And so, I've pursued this over decades now with findings that some of them, I'm told, seem to be remarkable. The one that I can talk about as famous without boasting is the counterclockwise study, because this is, if you tune into The Simpsons Go to Havana, they actually talk about the study. All right. So it's out there in the world. But essentially, this was our first test of mind-body unity. So we took old men and we were going to have them live for a week in a timeless retreat. Not timeless, it had been retrofitted to 20 years earlier. And they were going to live as if they were their younger selves. So we're putting the mind back in time. They're discussing past events as if they're just currently unfolding. As a result, in less than a week, without any medical intervention, their vision improved, their hearing improved, their strength, their memory, and they looked noticeably younger. And we've done now many, many studies that are all reported in the Mindful Body. Basically, if your mind is determining how fit you are, how healthy you are, how happy you are, I think that enormous control is available to all of us. And in some sense, by making very small changes, those who see themselves as losers can become winners. Those who see themselves as sick may be able to become healthy. Those who see themselves as incompetent need to question that incompetence, because incompetence just means, that what you tried, the way you tried it right now didn't work, does not mean that you can't do it. And a funny thing with respect to that is that people think they want to be expert at whatever they're doing. And you really don't, because you can perform tasks either perfectly, and then you're being mindless, or imperfectly, mindfully. So the example I use probably too frequently, a golfer might think, wouldn't it be great if every time I swung that club, I got a hole in one? But if you did, there'd be no game. And so to make that even clearer to people who don't play golf, you're a little kid, you go in the elevator, and it's very exciting. You're trying to reach that button, and you're not tall enough. Maybe a parent picks you up, and you press the button. And then the next time, a year later, and you're closer to it, but you still, and it's all very exciting. Then eventually, you're tall enough, you press that button. I don't know about you, but I don't get excited when I go into elevators anymore. All right. So once you fully are fully successful, the event is no longer appealing. So we need to reorganize ourselves and understand that feeling good comes from mastering, not having mastered. But now I'm in 20 different places at once. So you tell me where you want me to go.
That's a beautiful setup, Ellen, all around. And definitively, what was a spark in that paper has cultivated into a forest fire and beyond with the book at this point. I mean, so it's brilliant, brilliant in terms of the word. I absolutely love the way that you're describing everything. I'll start with a very, very key question, because everybody thinks, and I say everybody in double
You're going
quotes,
to be
in these
asking
air
about
quotes.
meditation, right?
You,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
got it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So meditation is great. It's just different from what I'm talking about. Meditation isn't mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
Meditation is a practice you undergo to result, hopefully, in post-meditative mindfulness. Yeah. Mindfulness, as we studied, is more immediate. You don't take yourself out of the world. In fact, you become much more part of the world. Now, when you recognize that you don't know and you can't know, because everything is changing, everything looks different from different perspectives. So when you recognize you don't know, you notice. And it's that active noticing that is the essence of being mindful. When you're actively noticing new things, the neurons are firing, and 45 years of data tells us that it's literally and figuratively enlivening. So when you think you know, when you're taught in school, horses don't eat meat, for example, that's the end of the game. There's nothing to think about. When you realize, well, in some circumstances, maybe they do, then you sit up and you pay attention. An example. So the thing that everybody thinks they know, how much is 1 + 1?
Generally, people will say immediately two without thinking
Right.
about it.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. But if you were to add one cloud plus one cloud, 1 + 1 is 1. One pile of laundry plus one pile of laundry, 1 + 1 is 1. 1 wad of chewing gum plus 1. Okay, so in the real world, 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, possibly as or more often as it does. So now that you know this, and let's assume, after we talk, somebody comes over to you and says, how much is 1 + 1? You're not going to mindlessly and be bored in the process answer 2. You're going to pay some attention to the context, and you're probably going to answer more mindfully, and you're going to say, it could be 2. Or you might want to play with the person and say, it could be 1.
Yeah.
So that when you know you don't know, you pay attention. Now, how do you get yourself, when you think you know, to realizing you don't know? Because when I first give these talks, everybody thinks they're mindful and everybody thinks it's always other people. And the reason for that is that when you're not there to know you're not there. 45 years of research sadly tells me that virtually all of us are not there most of the time. So how do you get there? If you simply notice new things about the things you think you know, you're going to see you don't know them as well as you thought you did. And then your attention will naturally go to them. Now, you have lots of people who say, be in the moment, and that's very sweet, but it's an empty instruction because, again, when you're not there, you don't know you're not there. Okay, so two ways to generally become more mindful. One is and this is the harder one, but if you can get yourself to accept you don't know, you don't have to feel bad about knowing because nobody knows. Then you approach every situation as if it's brand new. Or what you do is intentionally notice 3, 5 new things about the person you live with, the job that you're doing, the environment at large, anything. And you will see that you didn't. When I started to paint, for example, prior to that, not in the fall in New England, but if you had asked me what color are leaves, they're green. All right. So then I start painting. I start looking, wow, hundreds and hundreds of shades of green that keep changing as the sun changes in the sky. So it went from this one thing that I thought I knew to so many different things. So that if you ask me, what color is the tree outside right now, or we can say the furthest leaf on the left, doesn't matter. I'd say, I don't know. And then I'd take a look. And then I wouldn't think that it's going to stay that color because as the sun moves, its color will change. As the chlorophyll in it changes, it will change, and so on. Everything is always changing. And yet we're constantly, whether it's in industry, starts with school, taught to hold things still. So if you're taught this absolute, you know the answer, you don't pay any attention. When you recognize that you can't know, you tune in, and tuning in turns out to be good for you. It's the way you feel when you're most alive, is you feel engaged in things. Most of us are taught how to be robots when you're a robot, when you're mindless, you're letting the past determine the present. It's not as much fun and it's not good for you.
Very well said. I love it. Ellen, can you talk a little bit about relative to children versus adults? What's the research indicating, kind of the thoughts that
Yeah,
you have there?
well, I haven't done a lot of research with children, but I notice what they do. And you'll have a little kid especially in, let's say, a working class family, rather than upper class where they're bought all of these wonderful
Mhm.
toys and whatnot. And they'll take a box, a cardboard box, and they'll play with it for hours. Because to them, it's not just a cardboard box. It's a fort, it's a house, it's, it's a shield, and so on. And so children, I think we start out being mindful, exploring, you don't know. And then people give us all the answers. And so we mistakenly think we do know. And then, we're on our way to the mindless existence that most of us
Yeah.
assume.
Yeah, yeah, very, very well said. We're conditioned in so many different ways, sadly, and we lose the spark and the magic and what have you.
Exactly. But, and people need to understand something that I often fail to say is that being mindful is easy. So it's not just that it's enlivening, literally and figuratively, but it couldn't be easier. If you were going to come visit me right now, you've never seen my house. You don't have to practice anything. You walk in the door, you're going to notice, oh, did she do that painting? What books is she? Why does she have that thing over there? And so on. So when we know we don't know, we're naturally mindful, right? That's why people spend a lot of money to go on trips, because they want to see new things, but there are new things right around the corner from where they live. So you can save a lot of money and stay home once you become more mindful.
There you go. Ellen, any thoughts on the role of curiosity, exactly as you're
Well, it's
describing?
interesting. Yeah, no, that's a good question because people think curiosity is mindfulness, and it's similar but not the same. Because when you're curious, the assumption is there's an answer. And once you get that answer, you're no longer curious and you're mindless. All right. So when you're mindful, you recognize there is no single answer. It looks different from different perspectives. It's going to change over time. It's going to change depending on the frame of reference you use. To make that clearer, so let's say you're reading the newspaper and you spill a little hot chocolate on a word, and you say, "Is that an R?" You don't know, is it an R or an N? And then you look more closely, and then you say, "Oh, it's an N." Not O.
Yeah.
You say it's an N. So you at that point then become mindless. All right. So curiosity starts out when you're being curious. You want to find things out. The mistake is thinking that now I know it. And as soon as you say now I know it, it's no longer interesting to you. And then what happens is because when we're mindless, we make all sorts of errors. Essentially, when you're mindful, you can take advantage of opportunities that you don't even realize are there. Even if it's a simple thing like walking down the street and there's $100 bill, you're not going to notice it. We just don't notice what we don't expect to be there. Our expectations rule.
Very well said.
And
Very well said.
sadly, because our expectations are not typically, we don't expect as much as we should from ourselves, from other people, and so on.
Well said again, as always. Any thoughts on another key concept, if you will, that I'd love your commentary on is the concept of awe and how it relates to mindfulness and just the overall experience of the journey, if you will.
Well, when you don't know, and it's okay not to know, then everything you find out becomes exciting. I think that we have a mistaken assumption about work, for example,
Hmm.
that most people assume work has to be stressful. And the way to make work not stressful is not to do anything about the work, but to add some fun time. And so you want some life. It's called work versus life balance. And I think this is a mistake. Nothing has to be stressful. And that what we want to do, I believe, is work, play. It should all be essentially the same. It should all be engaging. It should be fun. And most people don't do it that way. Stress is a psychological concept. Stress results not from events, but from the view you take of events. So if you believe this terrible thing is going to happen, how could you not be stressed? But if you ask yourself, how do I know it's going to happen? And when something happens, it is not positive or negative. It all depends on the way we view it, the way we frame it. And so we don't have to run away from many of the things. Right now, people live their lives. If it's good, I have to kill people, push them aside to get it. If it's bad, I have to do everything to avoid it. When you recognize it is not good, it's nothing. It all depends on the view you take of it. And so then you just sit back. So, we're talking right now. I'm enjoying myself. If my internet goes out, it's not on my car. That's fine, because I'm also hungry. So I'll go eat.
Yeah.
That most of the things we experience are not, okay, here's a one-liner to help me say to hold on to, which is, when something happens, you might want to ask yourself, is it a tragedy or an inconvenience? And almost never is it a tragedy. So then you breathe, you say, all right, so I got in a little car accident, I didn't get the project done in time, I burnt the roast beef, whatever it is, so what? All right. And there are advantages to each of those things. But I think that if people said to themselves a simple thing, you're stressed right now, remember the last few times you were stressed. What happened? Because almost always the things we're worried about never happen. And so for me, everything is more or less a game. There's nothing that I don't enjoy that I'm doing. But if you take the view that most people do, which is work has to be stressful so that you need some fun time afterwards, I couldn't imagine doing anything for 8 hours a day, every day of the week, or at least 5 days of the week, and being in that tense state. Now, I don't have data for this next thing I'm going to say, but I truly believe it, that stress is the major killer. And I believe that if we took people, regardless of a disease, let's say people have cancer, any particular kind of cancer, nobody is going to be happy when they find out they have cancer. So we start 3 weeks later, let's say, and we determine how stressed they are over time. That amount of stress, I think, will predict the course of the illness over and above genetics, over and above nutrition, and dare I say, over and above treatment. That's how important it is. But stress is psychological. And, so with a few simple rules, we don't have to experience the overwhelming stress we have to. And if you're in a job and you can't figure out how to do it without this stress, I'd better off being unemployed, as long as you have some savings so you don't struggle.
Indeed. Ellen, I'd love you to comment on, very powerful things in your book, if you will, end the conversation here. Decision making, and don't try to make the right decision, make the decision
Okay.
right. I'd love you to comment on that.
Okay, so here, when you read The Mindful Body, you'll see that I disagree with experts all over the place. But most of the time that it's not just armchair reasoning, that I have hard data to go along with it. Well, there's a lot about decision making that is, in my view, simply wrong, people's views of decision making. And most people are making decisions the right way, but the problem is they think they should be doing it differently, and that causes the problem. So making decisions for most people is very stressful. What if I don't make the correct decision? And again, that stress translates into physical problems. You cannot, when you make a decision, it's to take some action. Once you take the action, you can never assess what the alternatives would have been. Should I have children? You can't live a life, okay, you have one life, you have children, another life, you don't have children, you decide which is, you never have that option. Now, when you add to that what I said a moment before, that outcomes are neither good nor bad, then no matter what decision you make, you should make it work for you. But let me go back a bit. If outcomes are neither good nor bad, it's the way you frame them, then you can't make a decision by adding up the costs and the benefits, because every cost is also a benefit. If you view it that way, every benefit is a cost. It's going to lead you nowhere. All right. Now, it's also the case that when you're having trouble making a decision, let's say between two alternatives, that's because psychologically they're the same for you.
Hmm.
So if I say to you, do you want A or B? Who cares, right? If I said to you, do you want to go to Paris or Florence? If you don't have a preference, that's because they're the same to you, right?
Hmm.
So the options end up the same. Then people gather information to make them different. So let's go back to A and B. So A and B, I don't know what they are. You gather information, you find out A is $100 and B is $10,000. There's no decision, right? Once you gather the information, the choices pull apart, and the decision, as soon as you articulate what the A and B is, the choice follows mechanically. There's no cost benefit analysis. Okay, so that sounds like I'm saying we should gather information. But no, because when do you stop gathering information? There's no rule. And each new piece of information can change the sense of the decision. So it's, hard to take all of this because it's so different from what everybody believes at the outset. And they can read about it in the Mindful Body. But essentially, if we put all this together, what we find is that you can't make the decision because you can't know in advance how the outcomes are going to feel. You don't know when to stop gathering information. But add the first thing I said, that outcomes are neither good nor bad, which it doesn't matter what the decision is. You can make it work,
Hmm.
all right? And so I took students in advanced research seminar, decision seminar I was giving. And I said, what I want you to do is live for the week without making any decisions. Flip a coin, roll dice, or you can use some heuristic, the first alternative that occurs to you or that's stated is the one you're going to take. Just don't go through any stress, any complex calculations, and so on. So they come back the next week. It was a marvelous week. It was stress-free rather than the worry about making the right decision. And then people think that you make a decision and you didn't make it work for you, that you should have chosen the other alternative. Regret is based on the mindless assumption that the other alternative would have been better, could have been worse. But it's actually neither better nor worse. It's nothing until you understand it, frame it in some way. As a story I tell in the book, because this book started off as a memoir, so lots of personal stories. Many years ago, my house burned, which destroyed 80% of what I owned. So terrible, right? I'm not suggesting that when you get to the end of the story that people should look forward to these sorts of things. However, okay, so I moved into the Charles Hotel. It was Christmas, and Christmas Eve, I went out. I came back to my room. The room was full of gifts, not by the people who own the hotel, but by the so-called little people. The people who park my car, the chambermaids who clean the room, the waiters and waitresses. It was beautiful. And it took years for me to be able to tell the story without it bringing tears to my eyes. So this gave me a feeling first to say, I lost everything, 80%, let's say, and it didn't matter. All the things I lost were things from the past, not who I was at the moment. And it gave me this feeling of community, of people that are basically good, that has stayed with me, decades since that event. So on whole, since I don't remember anything that I lost, except for one thing, and had this wonderful experience, it was a very positive thing. This terrible, this, might go in the category of a tragedy, more so than, you burnt the dinner or what have you. Nothing in and of itself. Let's say you are in a relationship and now you're very, very stressed that the person is going to leave you. Okay, well, that seems, like something negative. But relationships require two people. And if one of them is not there, you're not in the relationship you should be in. And so the relationship ends, and you get now to build a relationship that's actually more meaningful to you. At any rate, Another piece of this, which is relevant to lots of, uh, it's, I think is relevant and surprising to many people, is that we can't predict. Now, almost everything you do is based on a prediction, right? You go and you decide to have an apple. You're predicting that you're going to, it's going to be digestible, that you're going to enjoy the experience, and so on. Okay, so scientists know, statisticians know, and people in their gut know, but not they're not fully aware that you can't predict the individual case. So let's say Michael Jordan and I are having a foul shooting contest. If we were going to shoot 20 baskets, put your money on Michael Jordan. Okay. If we were going to each shoot just one basket, I think you'd be foolish to bet your entire life savings, because I often, not clearly, not professionally often, but get the basket, make the basket, and he on occasion loses. Another version of that, let's say we're going to go to a Mercedes dealership, wonderful cars, and we're going to choose one car at random. Will that car start? You probably say probably, not definitely, because you know there are lemons. And you probably wouldn't wager all of your life savings that this particular car at this particular moment will start. So what am I saying? Well, we can predict to the group. We can't predict to the individual. And as individuals, that's really, all we care about. So let's go back to decision making, because when you're deciding between two options, the only way you can make that decision is to predict how it's, should I have the apple or the orange? You're assuming that the apple will taste the way past apples have tasted to you. Well, your body is different now. The apple is different. And same thing with the orange. So I mean, you don't need to be able to predict. That's the most important part of this. You don't need to be making decisions, because essentially whatever happens, you just make it work. As I said, if we're disconnected now, that's great. I have things to do. If we're not disconnected now, that's great, because I'm enjoying talking to you. That the enjoyment, the satisfaction or dissatisfaction isn't a function of external circumstances. We're in charge.
I'll say the paradigm shift that you are putting forward is very, very powerful, and people listening to it, people embracing it. It will take time, and you've been at, you've got a tremendous amount of research, etc. What are some of the things that people can immediately act on to begin to
Well,
embrace some of this?
yeah, it depends on their circumstances. I mean, if it's the case that you're worried that something is going to happen, then you can do the little thing I already said, which let's make it a little more specific. You can say to yourself, so stress requires two things. It requires an assumption that something's going to happen. Remember, I said you can't predict, and that when it happens, it's going to be awful. So, okay, you're afraid something's going to happen. Give yourself 3 reasons why it might not happen. So you went from it's definitely going to happen implicitly to maybe it won't. You immediately feel better. Yep. Now, assume it does happen. How is that actually an advantage? So if you and I go out to eat and the food is wonderful, wonderful. You and I go out to eat, the food is awful, wonderful. I'll eat less. Or the food is awful, I'll pay more attention to the conversation we're having. So it's not that the experiences we have that are foisted on us, or that our parents, put us through, or spouses or what have you, are good or bad. The life you're living is a function of the views you're taking. And these views are also very much in control of our physical health. So I said, if we put the mind and body back together, and you're feeling sick, you usually act as if you have no control over it, when there are many, many things you can do. So let me give an example of some more of these mind-body studies. The most recent one is fun. I did this with my graduate student, Peter Ungle. So we inflict a wound. It's a small wound, but a wound nonetheless. And people are sitting in front of a clock. Unbeknownst to them, the clock is rigged. So
Mhm.
for a third of the people, the clock is going twice as fast as real time. For a third of the people, it's going half as fast as real time. For a third of the people, it's real time. The question we're asking is, will that wound heal? Most people think it's just going to heal when it heals. That's what the body does. Or will it heal based on how much time you think has passed? And clearly that's what we found, or else I wouldn't be talking about it. So the wound heals based on clock time. We have a few other clock studies. You know, you're in a lab, a sleep lab, you wake up, the clock tells you got 2 hours more sleep than you got, 2 hours fewer, or the amount of sleep that you got. Biological and cognitive functioning follows perceived amount of sleep. We have people with type 2 diabetes. We give them all sorts of tests. We now are going to have them play computer games, and we ask them change the game every 15 minutes or so. That's all done just so they'll notice that rig clock. And the question we're asking is, does blood sugar level follow, quote, real time, whatever that is, or perceived time? And again, it's perceived time. All right. You know, we have study after study where we're able to control the very things we think we have no control over. The doctor tells you, many people, they have some ailment, and they ask, how long is it going to take for my broken arm to heal, for instance? The doctor doesn't know, right? He doesn't know if I'm going to beat Larry, who I say, Michael Jordan, or that Mercedes is going to start. He's using normative data, how most people react. But at the moment, for you, you only care how you're going to react. All right. And so I forgot the beginning of my little story here. I'm all excited in telling it to you.
All good.
Um, Put me back on track.
All good. All good. Mind body unity is what we're
Okay.
talking about. Definitely.
Okay. Well, I don't know how long it's going to take your
Yep. Yep.
broken arm to heal.
Yep.
So if the doctor tells you, well, I don't know how long it would take. Let's say he says 6 weeks. He's guessing. Surely some people it's going to take 12 weeks. Some people it's going to take 2 weeks, what have you. But if you expect it's going to take the full length of time, that's probably how long it'll take. So we're doing some research now to actually put that to a test with all sorts of disorders.
Yeah.
People believe that when they have a chronic illness, there's nothing they can do about it because that's what chronic means to them, that it's uncontrollable. But no, all that means, if you have a chronic illness, is that the medical world hasn't figured out how to help you. There are always things you can do. So, for example, let's say we have an Olympic athlete and we have a couch potato, and they're both exposed to COVID, for argument's sake. Now, I don't have data for this, but I would guess the couch potato is more likely to get COVID. But let's say they both get it. I believe it'll take the couch potato a lot longer to get over the symptoms of COVID. So what am I saying? I'm saying that when one part of you ails, build up the rest of you, even if we don't know how to fix whatever the part is that's in some sense broken. We can always do things like that. So we came up with a method. Let me give you the genesis of it a little first. When people have chronic illnesses, they presume that the symptoms are going to get worse or stay the same, not that you're going to experience moments of it being better. Nothing only moves in one direction. When the stock market is going up, it doesn't go up in a straight line. It goes up, goes down a little bit, goes up, goes down a little bit, and so on. And so too with any of our symptoms. Now, not with the stock market, but when that pain that was killing you, whatever, is better, if you don't notice it, you can't take advantage of it, right? But if you ask yourself, why is this chronic pain now suddenly okay? Why, if I have dementia, can I remember, everything that I did yesterday? But tomorrow I may not remember those very same things. What's going on? Okay, so here's what I was trying to get to. The strongest medicine we have is probably a placebo. Placebos are wonderful, but you have a doctor giving you a nothing pill, because if it's a placebo, it means it's inert. You take it for almost every ailment. And fair number of people get better. Well, they're not getting better because of the placebo, right? Because it's nothing. You're making yourself better. So lots of my research is designed to figure out how we can give that control most directly. So now we take advantage of the symptom variability. It's a code word for being mindful. Mindful, just noticing change, right? So we're going to call you periodically and ask you, how are you? And is it better or worse than before? And why? 4 things at least happen when we do this. The first, rather than feeling helpless, which we often feel with any chronic illness, we feel, okay, I'm doing something for myself. So that feels good. Second, by noticing, by my calling you periodically, there's a time when it feels better. Well, good, because I thought I was always maximally in pain or whatever. Third, by asking the question, why is it better now? What are you going to do? You're going to do a mindful search. And we have study after study where when we make people more mindful, the neurons are firing. It's literally and figuratively enlivening. People actually do live longer. So the search itself is good for you, even if you can't figure out why right now it's a little better than before. And finally, I believe if you look for a solution, you're much more likely to find one. Now, how can I replace placebos with this attention to symptom variability? Because, what I want to do is, since you're actually in control of your health when you're responding to a placebo, how do you exert that control more directly? You don't need me to call you. Set your smartphone to ring in an hour. And when it rings, say to yourself, how do I feel now? And is it better or worse than before? And why? Then set it to ring in 2 hours. Pick whatever random times throughout the week. Well, we did this with big things. We did this with multiple sclerosis, stroke, Parkinson's, chronic pain, arthritis, and others. And in each case, we find an alleviation of the symptoms. Nothing I'm saying means that don't go to the doctor. But don't take what the doctor says as more meaningful than it actually is, because the doctor is giving you information about the general truth, not about you at this particular moment. And we don't have to wait. Right now, doctors are overwhelmed, and we can be taking care of ourselves in the interim. The good thing is this treatment, this attention to symptom variability treatment, has no downside. And a potentially very big upside.
Beautifully said. And it really emphasizes the mind body unity is so powerful. And we're not, quite honestly, I don't think enough people are tapping into it. I mean, very
No, people have no idea. So that not that many long years ago, a few decades ago, the medical model, so the whole medical profession believed that one's psychology, one's feelings, one's stress was irrelevant to disease. The only way you were going to get sick was the introduction of an antigen, pathogen. All right. Now they've moved, and now people talk about mind-body connection. The problem with talking about a mind-body connection is, how do you get from this thing called a thought, something fuzzy, to something material called the body? And because people can't solve that problem, they don't take full use of their minds in treating themselves. I said, they're not connected. It's one thing. So if you put Ellen here, she's here. If you put her here, she's all of her, all of you, and so on. We have so much data, and so many different approaches to provide the evidence for mind-body unity. And a simple thing is what I call the borderline effect. Now, so let's say, for argument's sake, you and I take an IQ test, and you get a 70. That puts you in the normal range, and I get a 69. That makes me cognitively deficient. We used to call it retarded. Now, but the difference between 69 and 70 is meaningless. Yeah. So at time one, we're exactly the same. I might have coughed and misread the question. It's not meaningful. Nobody would think it's meaningful, right? It's when a donut expires on Thursday. So at 12:01, in the morning, it's expired, where at 11:58,
Yeah.
it was still good for you. It's ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
But we have to draw the line somewhere. Okay, so what happens now? So we start off the same, but you think you have this cognitive problem. You're retarded, basic cognitively challenged. You're not. I am, and you're not. And let's go out 3 months. It will become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
Because if I believe I'm incapable, I'm not going to learn new things. I'm not going to put myself, in the same situations that you are. Okay, so we find that this is also true for disease. You have some people who, right at that borderline, these people have it, the 69, and these people don't have it. They're the same. But we find once you get that diagnosis, over time, the one who was given the diagnosis becomes ill, and the other group not.
You're a fountain of wisdom, quite honestly, Ellen.
Yeah.
I know we're running a little bit short on time at this point, but I would love for you to talk a little about vertical and horizontal society, and likewise the
Yeah.
little song for the
Yeah.
grandchildren. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. Thank you. This is kind of fun, but let me tell you how this started. I was, so you didn't announce that I have a Genius Award and 4 distinguished. So, okay, so I'm up there, right? Okay, in all my wisdom, I am at the house, and this giant load, very large truck is coming to deliver furniture. And I know that there's no way in hell that this is going to fit into that space. Somebody else there who is going to be unloading the truck, who sees himself as not a winner, who's uneducated, who you would just assume, feel sorry for. He's going to put all of this. So we have me, the genius, and this very much non-genius, right? I say it's not going to fit. He puts all of it away, and each piece of furniture is fully accessible. And it was at that moment, it just felt to me, it's not fair. He was clearly superior to me. Okay, so the idea was that the world is such, mindless, where we have it's vertical, and I sit near the top, you're near the top, he was near the bottom, and I want to make it horizontal. And so I wrote this little song for my grandkids. Everybody doesn't know something, but everyone knows something else. Everyone can't do something, but everyone can do something else. And the test of this, so they're 5 years old at the time, and one of them starts whistling. I say, Theo, you're such a good whistler. His brother then says, Grandma Elle, when Theo was learning how to whistle, I was learning something else. Very different. Not I'm inferior because I can't do that thing that he's being praised for, and so on. And I think that in schools, everything needs to be changed. Right now, most people give tests to find out what you don't know. Why? Why is the particular information that this particular teacher is teaching so crucial? And especially in today's world, when you can just, ask chat or Google and get the answers. So I'm hoping that eventually, as the world becomes more mindful, you see, when people become more mindful, they end up happier. They're more engaged in what they're doing. They have less need to diminish other people. And that, will help us to a society. Right now, we have enough goodies for everybody.
Yeah.
And everybody can feel good about themselves. Feeling good about yourself is not zero sum. If you feel good about yourself, doesn't mean that I can't feel equally good about myself. And so I'm hoping, the people, I'm on top, you're on top, but there are some who are not going to let us scale back a little bit. But eventually, all of those, we have a world now where I think the most popular drugs are antidepressants.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just the so-called losers. You have billionaires that, gee, I have all this money. Why aren't I happy? And I think the way to be happy, it's hard for people to process all of this and in 1 hour. But by being more mindful, when you're more mindful, you have many more options of the way you see things. You're aware of why you did what you did, so you don't feel bad about not having done something else. You don't have regrets. Your relationships improve because you have many ways of understanding why this person you're living with did this thing that's driving you crazy. For example, you may like me less than I would like you to because you see that I'm gullible. I don't want to be gullible. So we both try to change me. But you're not going to change me. The reason for it is nobody wakes up in the morning and then says, today I'm going to be whatever negative things we call them, and they call themselves. The point here is that behavior makes sense from the perspective of the person who's doing the behavior, or else they wouldn't do it. So what am I doing when I'm being gullible? I'm being trusting. Now, if instead of calling me gullible, you mindfully came up with a reason for why and you saw that I was trusting, you probably wouldn't want to change me. But if you still want to change me, you're not going to be able to change me by getting me to be less gullible, because that's not my intention. You have to get me to stop valuing being trusting. You're not, but okay, so our relationships improve, our willingness to try different things when we recognize that everybody doesn't know something, everybody knows something else. I sing this because it's to the tune of the old Sara Lee commercial with my students at Harvard. Everybody does. Okay. And I started by saying, I can't sing. But why shouldn't I sing? I enjoy singing, and as soon as you realize there are other things I can do, so why not do the things you can't do, as if everybody's pointing a finger at you. And that means that, you're a loser, at least in somebody's mind at some points in time. Everything about the way the world is organized, not everything, but so much of it makes me sad. Because again, let me end where I started, that everything is mutable. Everything can be changed to meet our needs, but we won't think to change it as long as we buy into the status quo mindlessly.
Beautifully said. So, Ellen, I want to make a statement and have you respond to it, if you will, any which way you'd like to respond, if that's all right.
Sure.
Because I could tell you very openly, this is what I think people are experiencing, because I'm experiencing it likewise. Your sense of aliveness, and that's a key word in my world as well, to be very honest about it, is intoxicating.
Good.
And it's absolutely beautiful.
Well, thank you. But we actually have data that when people are more mindful, other people find you attractive. And they find you attractive because you seem real, you are real. When you're being mindful, you're evaluated as being trustworthy, honest, authentic. When you know that I'm mindful, then I'm seeing who you are and who you are right now. And we're all drawing from the same ongoing situation. Just to underscore how important this mindfulness is, when you're more mindful and the neurons are firing, I already said it's good for your health. When you're more mindful, you have alternatives that to otherwise you'd be blind. You're more innovative. People find you more charismatic. We have data that it even leaves its imprint in the things that you do. It feels good. It's what you're doing when you're your happiest. So once people recognize how easy it is, I can't see any reason why anybody wouldn't, as you might say, hop on the boat or, you hop on boats, the bus, wherever you're hopping.
Yeah, we can all share in that aliveness. Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And wonderful, wonderful. My good friend, we're ready to close out. Any last statements that you'd like to make at all?
No, I just wish everybody well.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I highly recommend the book. I really encourage folks to digest it, embrace it, live it, if you will, in every way possible. Ellen, you're tremendous. Thank you ever so much for making the time. Truly, truly a pleasure to have you.
It was my pleasure.
Thank you so much, Ellen. Thank you for all the folks that joined us, and we look forward to future conversations. Take care now. Thank you.